All right,
We have
everybody,
10
welcome back
waiting
to
and
another Friday show. To all of our return viewers, thank you for coming back. We always love to see you. And if you're new to the show, I'm going to break down the format. Feel free to ask any questions about a product that you own or a product that you're considering purchasing. We're happy to answer anything about Netgear. Um, and yeah, don't be shy. No, there's no such thing as a bad question. You got the shorthanded dream team today. You've got myself, Michael, and Ben. I'll go ahead and kick it off. I'm Alec. I'm a senior creative design specialist here at Netgear. I do mostly web design. And I'm joined by Michael and Ben. Michael, you want to kick it off?
Sure. Hey, everyone. I'm Michael, Technical Marketing Manager at NETGEAR. I spent a lot of my time working with our data products, as well as having done tech support for NETGEAR in the past, and looking forward to helping you out with any questions you got. And over to Ben.
hey everybody, it's Ben back again. I'm Digital Experience Manager here at Netgear. I work with Nighthawk Pro Gaming, Smart Parental Controls, and Armor. And I love your guys' questions. I love all of you guys being back, all you regulars. No, we're not a service provider, but
You just saw that. Yep.
but we are experts in networking. And let's kick off this show. So we've got wow, already 16 of you guys. So let's see how it
Yeah,
goes. I don't think there's any questions really at the
there's not
moment.
too many questions. We did have the one about Netgear being a service provider.
Yeah.
That was a quick
we
no.
just make the hardware
No.
for it, but we don't actually provide the service.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, what's great about having a Netgear product is, unlike having a product from a service provider, you don't have to pay for it monthly. I mean, obviously you do have to pay for it, but um,
Yeah.
it eventually will pay for itself in savings from monthly rental fees on equipment. So
Yep, and it
that's
usually doesn't take that long, because
mhm,
if you're paying anywhere from $10 to $13 to $15 a month rental fees, those add up really fast.
mhm.
Yeah, my modem, just for example, it was a $15 rental on the modem, and that was 3 years ago, and it's gone, and it paid for itself over again. Oh, here's a great question from Elcon Basie. Can I ask about Wi-Fi 6E? Yes, you can. Go ahead.
Yep, and that was the easy answer. Yes.
Yeah,
Okay,
easy.
next question.
Just softballing them over to me, so it's nice. Is Netgear the #1 brand for routers? I think that we have the majority market share
Yep.
in routers. So yes, I would say we are the #1 brand.
Do we want to talk about what kind of Wi-Fi 6E does and what's new with that technology?
I
Sure.
think that was the implied
Yep.
Yeah,
portion of that question.
totally.
But yeah, let's go ahead.
So who wants to jump in? I don't
I,
want to hog it all.
I can start, but you might want to take over at a certain point. So typically with, what we've had for so long is, dual band, and one band is a 5 gigahertz band and one is a 2.4. Well, with Wi-Fi 6E, you're going to have a 6 gigahertz band. So that's going to be, well, to my knowledge, it's going to be like a stronger signal and faster, but it's not going to go as far as a 5 gigahertz band. Um,
Yeah, the higher in the frequency, and correct me if I'm wrong, Michael, but the higher in the frequency, the shorter the range, but the wider the frequency band is. So you get more information across, but in a shorter distance.
That's definitely correct.
mhm,
And you can just figure that not only on the range of it, as you go up in frequency, the range gets shorter, but also its ability to penetrate objects goes down as well. And that's mainly because as a waveform, which is sort of like this, gets tighter and tighter, which means the frequency goes up, it spends more time in that physical object as it's trying to go through. So you can just figure if 6 gigahertz is a higher frequency than 5, it's going to spend more time within the wall. So it's going to degrade more as it goes through the wall. So
mhm.
not only distance-wise, but just going through objects, it's going to be affected more than the 5 gigahertz or the 2.4.
Okay.
Totally.
And that's a good way to kind of think of it. And that's one thing that a lot of people don't take in consideration is, where, because they're always like, oh, the Wi-Fi sucks here, but you got to take in consideration, what are you trying to get through? If you're in a concrete bunker like my apartment, Wi-Fi is not going to go that far. But boy, it peels right through plath and last, or plaster and lath and plaster. Good grief!
Yes.
It'll go through that, no problem, because that's like practically paper.
Mhm.
But concrete, steel, those sort of constructions, you're going to have a little bit more difficulty.
Yeah, it's going to be a bit more challenging.
Yep. And usually, like with steel buildings, any Wi-Fi that's going to get out of there is going to go through, openings in the wall, windows, things like that. It's not actually going to make it through the metal, because metal pretty much kills all Wi-Fi. If you basically completely covered your router in aluminum foil, you're not going to get any signal out of it.
Yeah, and with that, that kind of is. There's a couple of questions that have popped up. Would Wi-Fi 6E be faster than hardwired 5? Hardwired 5 isn't really 5. It's still whatever that port is. So if it's at 1 gig, it's the hardwired is going to be transferring at 1 gig. In ideal conditions, Wi-Fi 6E might be faster than wired in, let's say, laboratory testing. I don't know if it's going to be faster in a household.
Yeah,
It
also,
it actually can be, depending on the speeds that you're getting on your wired. If you're on your wired, if it's a 1 gigahertz max or 1 gigabit max wired line, then 6E probably will be faster if you're within, say, 5 to 10 feet of the 6E router. In fact, Patrick Lowe, our CEO, was showing off the fact that he had one of the 6E phones and a 6E router in his apartment in Hawaii. And he was getting about 1,200 megabits a second, which is 200 more than the theoretical max you're going to get on a 1 gigabit 5E connected line. So right. It really just depends on what the max is that's on the wired connection and how close you are to the router. The farther you get from the router, especially if you're on the 6E band, the 6 gigahertz band, you're going to notice a faster drop off than you are going to with the 5 or the 2.4.
Yeah, I was going to say that same thing pretty much. Like I have a 100 megabyte switch here, and I use that for my wired connection. And obviously, like when I'm connected over the air, it's faster. But I like to have the switch for the consistency. It never really skips a beat, which is great for these streams.
Yeah.
And for video calling and all that kind of stuff. 100 megabytes is pretty good for most things. Okay, so this is kind of a fun question from Mando here. Mando asks, what is each of your favorite Netgear products and why? I'll let one of you guys start.
Okay, I'll jump in to start. Unfortunately, I can't say there's any one particular one because I'm such a techie. I love every different types of hardware, and those things that use the odder sort of hardware I enjoy even more are power line devices, for instance, where you're actually sending a network signal across the house wiring in your house. I find really cool technology. And probably the other thing would be our mural canvases, because those, you can put any of your videos, home photos, and even classic pieces of art on it, and it looks totally awesome, and you can control it from anywhere in the world. So just a couple of things I like.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna say there's a couple of items that we have that I think are absolutely amazing products, and I'm gonna have to say the mural canvas is going to be one of them. Just because I got my daughter's grandparents both the photo frame, and you can share your photos across, and then it pops up on their screen. and it's a wonderful way of staying connected.
There you go. There's the photo frame right now.
Yeah, I think it's great. It's a great product. I'm now looking at buying it myself. The second, there it is. And the second product is the XR1000. Excuse me. Mainly because of the gaming software, and just the optimization. I've vastly improved my Call of Duty game, Cold War. I'm looking at a KD ratio of like 1.37, regularly getting about 18 eliminations per match. And, it's just, lately I've been wondering if I've been playing against bots, but no, they're actually humans. And I'm like, I can't be that good. But I do have a little bit of a technological edge, considering that my ping is 14 to 16, and I'm playing on 54 ping servers. So
yeah, it's all of the reflexes. It's all you.
Yeah, I love the fact that 3 of my shots hit them before one of their shots hit me. So I'll turn it over to Alec.
Yeah, I think my favorite one is I don't have it, so caveat there. I think the M5 is really cool. I like the fact that it compacts so much new technology into such a tiny little device. I think it's amazing. And I really want one. I think it's great to be able to have a private network wherever you go versus, connecting to public Wi-Fi. If I'm working on, work stuff, I don't want to be connecting to Starbucks. I mean, obviously we're not really working at Starbucks right now, but theoretically.
Right.
So yeah, that's probably my favorite. I also have a canvas and a frame. A canvas and a frame. I really like those two. Yeah, those are just like very interesting products. It's really cool to be able to display art like that. So yeah, that was a fun question. Thank you so much, Mando,
Yeah, that was
for
a
that
great
one.
question. And then we have a batch of questions about antennas, and this can go into a couple of different directions. We've got Ryan, who says, how important are antennas on a router? Do they need to be in a certain direction? And then Adrian's talking about our RAX series kind of looking like they're part of the Galactic Empire with their starship design. How important is adjusting and moving your antennas? And then there's another question. Vanessa, welcome back. She's like, I like the semi-TIE fighter look. So on antennas, having them built in, like a couple of the RAXs have them kind of built in that like Imperial shuttle design. And then other ones like, the XR1000 have movable antennas. I'm going to let Michael kind of give a little bit of a crash course on antennas, and what do you think is like the best sort of setup for both fixed and flexible antennas?
Okay. Well, first on the fixed antennas, you don't really have a lot of options as to which way the antennas are going to go, especially like on our Imperial Star ship that we have. The antennas are basically straight up. And so you can't really control them. You can actually fold them down in to make them completely flat, but that's not really going to be advantageous because one side of the antenna is right over the motherboard. So you're not going to get any transmission through that. So they're basically designed always to be straight up and down. Adjusting the directions of antennas on directional antennas, you don't really see that much of a difference on it. The antennas themselves basically radiate outward, kind of like a donut going out. It's more like 2 donuts from an antenna, but the idea is it radiates outwards from the sides of the antenna because you've got a wire that's going up and down, and then it's radiating out of that inside the antenna. Normally, you don't really need to aim them any direction. You're not going to see much of a difference. The one time it can make a difference is if you've got it like on one floor and you're trying to push a signal down through the floor below it or the ceiling above it. Putting the antennas horizontally can help because then it's transmitting more up and down than what's leaking out from the top and bottom.
Now, on the fixed one, could you mount it on the wall so now your antennas are pointing in a different direction?
You could, yep. And in fact, some of ours are wall mountable. And then instead of it being up and down like this, it's going to be side to side and going to be pushing it out left and right.
Cool. I did skip over a Husky Gamers question, so I want to circle back on that, and I'll turn it back over to Alec.
Yeah.
Which NETGEAR modem can be recommended because they live away from town, and where everybody has, where I live, everybody has NETGEAR, which is great. I'm just going to say any of the, depending on what your speed is coming from your ISP, any one of the CM series is a fantastic modem. You'll need to connect it to an additional router because a modem just connects to the ISP and then sends a signal through. So you'll need to connect it to a router if you want like Wi-Fi and other connections and stuff like that. But any of the CM series, anything north of the CM 1000 would be a good choice to start out with.
Yeah, and if you get a CM 1000 or greater, then they're all what's called DOCSIS 3.1, which means that they're the newest standard for connecting up to your internet service provider and use the most number of channels to be able to send data back and forth. So if there is congestion in your area because there's a lot of other people using the same connection that you are to your internet service provider, you'll probably get better speeds because it basically has more lanes to work with to try to get your the speeds that they've allocated down to you. And I know on where I happen to live, my plan gives me 400 megabits down, but with my DOCSIS 3.1 NETGEAR modem, which is the CM1200, I get 470. So I'm even getting about 70 megabits higher than what they're actually offering me.
Yeah, I'm same. I get 600 from my ISP. I'm pulling down with DOCSIS 3. I'm pulling down instead of 600. I'm pulling almost 700 down regularly.
Sorry if you can hear the phone in the back. I forgot to turn it off.
It's live. That's how you know that this is happening right now.
Yeah. There's no cuts.
No cuts.
And speaking of live, I just had to bring this up because it was a really cool thing that I saw, but kind of scary at the same time. Is there's a company that's working on alpha software that can actually fake you on Zoom calls. What? And it basically watches you on Zoom calls for a little while and learns all of your nuances and so on. And then it can actually be on a Zoom call and it can make, little responses like nodding your head, saying, and pretending like you're actually interested. That's pretty scary.
Maybe we'll have one of us do that for one of the shows and see
if, see how well it works.
And see if you could pick out who it is.
Yep.
Yeah, that could be
and then
fun.
It turns out it's like the shell game. It's all of us, not one of us. They never know.
None of them are on the show. It would be fully automated. How do you know, or is this show fully automated?
Oh, exactly.
That's a good question. All right, let's see here. So next question is from Ren. Well, actually, next question here is from Hamad. Is 6 gigahertz really practical for Wi-Fi use cases? Yes, I would say paired with 2.4, which is going to really be kind of your long reach signal and your like kind of low speed signal for like IoT devices mostly. 6 gigahertz is going to be a nice bump in speed compared to your 5 gigahertz. Granted, it will go a little less far and through objects less easily. It's not that different. It's not as different like as 2.4 to 5. Like 5 to 6 is not quite as drastic.
Yep. And the good thing is that the chips that actually give you the Wi-Fi 6E are tri-band or quad band, which means that you're always going to have at least your 2.4, your 5, and your 6. So your device can decide which one of those is best depending on the location that you're at.
Hmm.
So it doesn't hurt to have it, because when you're closer and the 6E is going to give you faster speeds, then you'll be getting those. But if you happen to walk into 2 rooms down, it'll probably click over to the 5, and you go far enough out, then you'll be using your 2.4.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Which also means that you're probably going to see a lot more products with a backhaul as well.
Hmm.
Yes.
Especially for your mesh networks.
Yep.
Totally.
Yeah. Now I know
which
that
is going to make everything easier.
there have been some talks, and there are competitors that are actually really pushing big on the 6 gigahertz and using that as their backhaul. And I personally would say that's a horrible idea, simply because of the range and the fact that it doesn't penetrate objects real well. And you want that backhaul to be rock solid and fast. And using the 6 gigahertz, not the best idea. So most likely, the smarter companies will do quad band, and one of the 2 5 gigahertz bands will still be used as your backhaul.
Yes, that makes a lot more sense. 5 has a lot better penetration and distance than 6. It's not as fast, but it's it's old reliable. It's what it is at this point in time.
Yeah, totally.
I'm going to do a little bit of pitch. We're coming up to the half hour here, so get your questions in, but also get your thumbs up in. There's 25 of you, and only 9 of you have hit that thumbs up. And that thumbs up helps us with the algorithm, helps support this channel, helps support this particular event, and keeps us on the air. So that's my pitch for that.
Totally. Yeah, we really appreciate it. So definitely, if you're enjoying the show, definitely drop that like. All right.
And even if you're marginally enjoying the show, hit that like.
Yes. Even if you've thought about you might like the show sometime in the future, hit the like.
Exactly.
If you like Michael's shirts, hit the like.
Definitely hit the like.
All right, cool. So next question here is from Ren. And Ren asks, I have an R7000 AC 1900 that is short the 2300 features. Okay, so this is like a kind of a V1, V2 situation, it seems like. When I enable the guest network, users appear to get the same IP address as my home network. And I guess, the follow-up to that one would be, how can I assign them a different... Okay, no, it looks like the follow-up question is here. If there isn't a separate subnet, how do I keep them off my home network subnet and still go directly to the internet? Do you have a hidden ACL? I see no way to set up a separate subnet in DHCP.
Yeah, I haven't actually used the R7000 in a long time, but it should have a function within the admin GUI where you can actually turn on and off, giving the guest network access to your local network. And if you have that turned off, then the router itself should basically quarantine anyone that's on the guest network from accessing anything that's actually on your local network. Even though they both have the same IP address scheme, it should be able to still quarantine those. Like I said, I haven't looked at the R7000 in a while, but that's the way our current routers are doing it. And since the 7000 was one of the first ones that had guest network, I would assume that it's using exactly the same functionality.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so the next question here is from, this is a Ben question from Jerry. Any news or updates for Duma OS 3 on the XR700?
Currently, right now, there is, we are a worldwide, company, and a lot of our services are in, different areas of the world. And currently, our QA is in a area that has a crisis with COVID, and that has put a limit on resources. We're trying to get through as much QA as possible, and with that, at this moment, it's slowing us down a little bit on the QA on certain firmwares. And unfortunately, that's the Duma firmwares have taken a little bit of a hit. When that clears up, I don't know at this moment, but it's something that we're looking at, and we may have to switch resources and that sort of thing. But that's all I can say at this moment.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Well, moving on from that, then we have a question here from Hamad, and I think this is something we kind of chatted about last week. Can you get
Yeah.
Bluetooth integration on a router? You could theoretically get some sort of Bluetooth USB connection device, but as we mentioned last week, really not too much of a use case for that.
Also, the
Um,
USB connection device probably would not work on the router at this point because those devices actually require drivers to be installed.
right.
And if you just plugged into the USB port on our router, then it wouldn't have the drivers to run. And
Exactly.
I've been thinking about that question, and honestly, it doesn't make a lot of sense to put Bluetooth integration on the router because Bluetooth is basically a point-to-point type of connection where you've got one client device doing Bluetooth connection to another device. It's not meant for broadcasts, for instance, where you have one Bluetooth device that's talking to 10 different devices at the same time. So putting on your router doesn't really make a lot of sense unless the router is going to be acting as a Bluetooth hub. And so I don't really see us putting something like that in to our routers. It's an interesting suggestion, but I don't see enough of the benefits versus costs to make it really worthwhile, considering what Bluetooth is actually normally used for.
Right, because Bluetooth is usually a one-to-one, not a one-to-many.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so that connection, it doesn't make a lot of sense because with a router you try to connect as many devices as possible.
Yeah, in fact, the watering system that I just put in is a great example of the difference of using Bluetooth and using wireless. The watering devices can use Bluetooth off of your phone, and you're just talking directly to one of the devices, and then you have to switch over to the other Bluetooth device to talk to that. But they also sell a wireless dongle that talks to them, and then that wireless dongle is wireless to your phone, so you can use your phone using wireless to talk to them. But it's really a one-to-one type of connection at all times when you're talking about Bluetooth. So it makes more sense for anything that you're going to be putting into a router that it's meant to be wireless based and is going to talk to more than one device.
Well, and that's also why you see a lot of your IoT devices wireless, not Bluetooth.
Yep.
All right.
Gotcha. Makes sense. All right. So on to the next question here. We have one from Ryan.
Mm-hmm.
And Ryan asks, what can block the signal from reaching parts of your home? This is a very good kind of like fundamental question, relative to home networking.
Aluminum foil.
Well, yeah, the question I would have on this is, are you trying to actively block it from parts of your home, or you're wondering what in your home could be blocking it from parts of your home? Because the answers are similar, but the solutions are slightly different. If you're trying to block it yourself, then Ben's joke, but absolutely true, is aluminum foil. Aluminum foil will definitely block a signal from going through.
Your second guess is if you don't like the stylings of having an entire wall of aluminum foil, then get a 50-gallon fish tank, and that will suck the life out of Wi-Fi as well.
Yeah, and there is also some RF resistant paints as well that you can use, specialized paints that'll help cut down on the amount of RF that'll go through the wall that's painted. But you do have to think about things like, if you paint a wall, you also have a ceiling that the signals can go through.
Yeah.
And we actually talked about that at work with one of our rooms, trying to block out some of the Wi-Fi because we have so much Wi-Fi in our building. And the problem we had is we have acoustical tiling for the roof, which means that even if we could block the walls, you're going to get Wi-Fi bleeding out over the tops of it anyway.
Right.
Yeah, because it will find the path of least resistance.
Exactly. Now, for the other thing is, if you're wondering what normally in the house stops Wi-Fi from going through, there's a lot of things that can do that. Ben's fish tank is a good example. Anything that puts out RF signals can cause problems, cause congestion in signals going through. Depending on the type of house that you have, if you have lath and plaster walls that have chicken wire in it, then that'll definitely kill your Wi-Fi signals. As one person in the chat said a few shows ago, you're basically putting yourself inside a Faraday cage, which is meant to stop any signals from going in and out. A lot of piping in your walls, especially when people want to get signals from, say, the first floor down into a basement. And when you walk down the basement, you look up at the ceiling, and that's where all of the piping is running. Your air conditioning, your plumbing, all of that, that can definitely affect the signals.
Especially when it comes to the plumbing. I know that like plumbing is kind of switching over to more of a plastic kind of runs, which allow the signal to go through. But we're talking like traditional copper and
Yep.
piping.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And if you have insulation on things like ductwork on running underneath the flooring, that insulation a lot of times will have metal around it, and that will definitely stop signals. Having a microwave right between you and where your router is, if the microwave's turned on, that can definitely affect your 2.4 signals, especially because they run on 2.4 and they throw out a lot of noise. Trying to get signals into a kitchen with refrigerators, stoves, all the other type of electronics that you have, that can also degrade the signals. So there's lots of things that can affect it.
Yeah, lots to consider. Really, at the end of the day, like what can stop signals is like almost anything. I mean, a lot of things are gonna stop signals. It's just to what extent, you know. All right, cool. So next question here is from Places and Spaces 35, who's been on the show before, so welcome back. And they ask, to test out the speeds of my multi-gigabit Ethernet switch on a gigabit subscription, is it better to use I'm guessing iPerformance 3 or Ookla speed test?
What's a better speed test or preferred speed test?
Yeah, basically what's the best speed test? And it's hard to say because they all vary in performance. Like they'll all spit out a different number, which is kind of strange. You know,
I like Ookla because it's easy and simple.
Yeah, and I would probably say that it depends on how geeky you want to be. iPerfs is probably going to give you a more accurate raw number because it's designed as an engineering level, just raw test of data throughput. But I do think that something like speedtest.net is much easier to use. Their optimizations, especially if you download the client apps that they have, are going to give you a pretty close number, and they're far easier to use, and they have more of a visual appeal than running something like iPerfs.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. So hopefully that helps you make your decision. All right, question here from Braden, who has a Doge emoji, making me wish I didn't sell my Dogecoin in March. Can I forward my NETGEAR Nighthawk router from my mobile phone? Can I port forward my NETGEAR router from my mobile phone? I don't believe there's a port forwarding feature on the Nighthawk app.
Not yet.
Not yet. Yeah, so you're going to be stuck using the desktop GUI for that. But maybe in the future, that's an interesting suggestion.
No, I think that's a good suggestion, and something that we can certainly get over to the services team.
Absolutely.
And it's something that other people have asked for before, is just to sort of expand the functionality of the mobile app, because there are quite a few of the more technical features that you can get logging in directly through your browser that aren't in the mobile app, and more people would like to see those in a mobile app. I think it's sort of a trade-off as to functionality and complexity. The more complex it is, then it's harder to actually put that functionality in a phone and make it really usable. But yeah, we definitely want to expand out the functionality so it mirrors a little bit more what you can do through the browser.
Totally. Okay, so we've got kind of a string of Wi-Fi 6E questions here. So the first one is from Kieran. And Kieran's basically asking, how much less distance does 6 gigahertz cover versus 5 gigahertz? And this is kind of a hard question to put a number on, because it's going to really depend on your and and obtrusion so much. In certain scenarios, Wi-Fi 6E might go 10 feet less, or in some scenarios it could go 40 feet less. It really just depends on
Mhm.
what's there between you and the router.
Yeah, I did actually read an article recently from a reviewer. His name is Dong, and we've worked with him before, having him review tons of our products. And he actually did a pretty good test with our new Rax E500. That he did an outdoor test testing the range and drop off of 5 versus the 6 gigahertz. And even though he had a brand new 6E phone, which means that it's not going to be heavily optimized at this point because there's almost no 6E devices out there. With that, he saw at about 60% of the range of the 5 gigahertz outside line of sight, not having to go through anything. That's the point where he was really starting to see a severe drop off. So maybe 30% less range just in his testing. And it could be, far worse or better, as they tweak drivers, et cetera. But at this point, in line of sight type of thing, he was seeing at least a 30% drop off.
Got it. So yeah, hopefully that kind of helps answer your question, but
Yep.
it's
And
hard
if
to
you
put
put a
a number
wall in
on
the
it.
way, the drop off is going to be even more because, as I mentioned, when the higher frequency goes through the wall, it's going to get degraded faster than the lower frequencies.
Right. All
Yep.
right, so another 6E question here. If 6 gigahertz is theoretically faster, why have all routers thus far had the same throughput for 5 gigahertz and 6 gigahertz? Will that change in the future?
An easy answer. The reason why is because there basically are no 6 gigahertz products out there. Technically, there are, but there's so few of them that you don't really have anything to compare to right now. I believe Samsung, their 21S has 6 gigahertz. There's a couple of Asian phones that also have 6 gigahertz on it, but even the Apple product doesn't. They've been promising on the 12 that it was going to have it, and it never came out. So now they're promising the 13 is going to have it. So there's almost no devices. That's the reason why they're not showing any speed differences.
Yeah, it's probably going to phase in less, I'd say less quickly than Wi-Fi 6 did. That'd be my guess. I mean, Wi-Fi 5 to Wi-Fi 6 was a big jump, obviously, a completely new technology, whereas 6 to 6E is more of an update versus like a completely new technology. I mean,
Oh,
it
and
kind of is completely new, but
that's one thing I thought about is also don't confuse Wi-Fi 6 with 6 gigahertz.
Yeah.
Those are not the same things. 6E is 6 gigahertz. Wi-Fi 6 uses exactly the same speeds as the 5 gigahertz do. The difference is that there's a different way that they're actually handling the packet data that's being passed between the clients and the router, and power management, that sort of thing. So there was a lot of optimizations that were put into Wi-Fi 6, but they're still using exactly the same bands as your Wi-Fi 5 routers, which is 2.4 and 5 gigahertz.
Which is why you're seeing the same throughput.
Yep.
So yeah, that straightens out that question. It can be a little bit confusing. I know that like naming things in this industry is not our strong suit.
Just remember, they went over to Wi-Fi 5 and Wi-Fi 6 and going back to 4, 3, 2, and 1 to make it easier for people to understand which one is supposed to be better. But almost as soon as they've made that change, we can see we're already starting to get confusion because of how they talk about the frequency, as well as when you talk about phones and like a 5G phone, which is not the same thing as a 5 gigahertz router.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Definitely confusing, but it isn't too hard to understand if you kind of look past the name and just look more objectively at like what each technology entails. Cool. So moving away from the 6E conversation. Question here from Husky. How many connections can the NETGEAR CM1200 hold? This is really going to rely on your router more than your CM1200. Because your router is typically what you're going to be connecting to, whether that's through Ethernet or through wireless. I mean, there are four Ethernet ports on the CM1200. You really shouldn't be using those for internet access.
No,
Um,
you should have one of those ports is heading out to the router, and then your connections are going from your router.
that's
Yeah.
right. Yeah, so can't really answer that question,
Yeah.
Husky.
Well, then it comes down to, two pieces. One of them is, how many connections can your router support?
Mhm.
And then how many connections can be supported by the bandwidth that you have from your service provider? Because
Yep.
the bandwidth probably from your service provider is going to be the big limiting factor. Where if you only have a 20 megabit line to your internet service provider, that's probably only going to be able to support 2 to 5 devices at a time connected to the internet and actually streaming stuff. If you're doing like email, that takes almost no bandwidth.
Mhm.
So that's going to be a really big limiting factor, kind of like a funnel, where you can have all the speeds on your internal LAN at the top, but when the funnel goes down to the bottom where you have that smaller hole, that's your pipe out to the internet. So that's going to be the limiting factor really on how many devices can be connected out to the internet at the same time. Because your router can handle up to 254 IP addresses that it can hand out.
Right.
But each router's CPU power can really only handle so many active devices that are asking it for services at one time, depending on what the services are. And most of the routers are rated, the really low end ones are rated for maybe like 16 devices, then up to 32. And then I think our higher end routers, you're looking at the 64 devices. And it can actually have more than that connected to it. But that would be the maximum number of active devices trying to do something with the router at the same time.
Mhm. All right, so hopefully that helps. Next question here is from Ren, who asked earlier about the guest network. And Ren says, I have to assign an Ethernet port to the guest network as I have a number of hardwired IoT devices to go to just the internet, not on my network. Any suggestions? Um,
Unfortunately, on the
So
guest
I think
network,
he's making the guest network so that way stuff like the IoT devices don't interrupt actual device connectivity.
yeah.
Sounds like it, yeah.
But if you set it up as a separate device or a separate network, I know a lot of things like speakers and TV where you can throw things up from your phone. You won't be able to do that unless you connect to the subnet that you're on. But that it is an interesting way of putting it together.
Hmm.
Well, he's also mentioned that he's got hardwired IoT devices, and the
Yeah.
guest
Right.
network isn't designed for hardwired devices. It's designed for only wireless because unless you're going in through the hardware and the router it depends on the router you're using whether or not you can create your own VLANs to actually separate stuff through the actual hardwired connections. The R7000, for instance, its guest network is just designed for wireless connections. It's not designed for any wired devices. Any wired devices that you're plugged in can't be put on the guest network. They're always going to be on your local internal LAN.
Hmm. Cool. So hopefully that kind of helps guide your decisions on finding a solution for your guest network. Let us know if you have any more questions, though. We'll definitely help you out as much as we can. All right, question here from Vanessa. Will two REXE 500 routers, one in the basement and one on the first floor, work nicely in tandem? I'm sorry, I skipped a question, but we'll come right back to that from M. Neves. Um, but to answer Vanessa's question, um, I probably wouldn't suggest that as a solution. Um, you probably, if you're going to have two, you know, access points, you're probably going to want to do it in like a mesh network situation. You could do like a wired backhaul, I believe, between the two RAX routers, and kind of accomplish the same thing, but you're not necessarily kind of working with like a router plus satellite
and
situation.
and you're kind of wasting a lot of money or hardware on turning your rack C500 basically into an access point at that point.
Yeah, I would say a mesh. I would go a mesh over that.
Yeah, I mean, if you're
mainly
wanting
because
to,
you're spending a lot of money for a dumb, like a smart router and turning it into a dumb satellite.
yeah, I was just gonna say if you're willing to buy two REX C500s, you're probably gonna want to go with something like the RBK 852, which is our top of the line Orbi 2-pack. So you're gonna get a satellite and a router. You know, not 6E necessarily, but you know, like we've said, there's not a lot of 6E devices, so it's not really you're not missing out on too much, if we're being honest. Which is
It
why we
depends on
only
how
have.
much. Yeah, it depends on how much you want to future-proof yourself for a year from now or a year and a half from now when there's a lot more 6E devices. At least we hope there's a lot more 6E devices. There should be. It shouldn't be like 11AD that came out, which was 60 gigahertz speeds, which had very limited use. So you basically didn't see any devices that were using it. But with this, there's enough of a use case that hopefully they'll come out. But as Alex said, it's not going to be as fast of a rollout as the 5 gigahertz was because it's not a sort of generational jump. It's more of just a small incremental jump.
Yeah, I'm thinking you're going to see it. I mean, and this is just a guess. You know, we don't control this at all, but I'm thinking you're going to see it on like premium products, like you know, iPhone 13, Samsung S21 Ultra. You know,
Yep.
stuff like the Chromebook. Probably never going to see the 6 gigahertz band. I mean, not for a while. You know.
Not until there is a theoretical like 9 gigahertz band.
Yeah.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. So, you know,
Yeah.
I think if you like we said, if you want a future proof, not a bad idea. I also don't think you're sacrificing hardly anything with Wi-Fi 6 versus Wi-Fi 6E.
And Vanessa's right. You put solar panels on top of your roof. Yeah, that's definitely going to hurt your Wi-Fi signal as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. So we apologize for skipping your question, MNE.
Yep.
So we'll come back to that now. What are the right settings for 1 gigabit fiber Verizon with the Nighthawk RAX 120? Well, you know, this is kind of a hard question to answer because I don't know how much the settings are going to necessarily vary based upon your 1 gigabit fiber speed. We can kind of give some best practices for setting up a router. Um, you know, what do you guys think are some key settings when setting up a new router that you should check or uncheck?
Ben, you got any ideas?
Oh, well, one, I'm a big fan of IPv6 and setting that up, and universal plug and play. Just making sure that those are working.
Mm-hmm.
Some sort of you know, I am okay with my 5 and my 2.4 being the same network, mainly because it's just you know, I don't have a lot of people on my network, so I'm not worried about, you know, splitting stuff out at this moment. But if you wanted to, you could split it out so that your IoT stuff is on the 2.4 and your connected devices are on the 5. Then I would say after that, just making sure that you have like some sort of cybersecurity for the network. That's the next thing I would do. That's probably the list. But for the fiber, you know, Verizon fiber, for the fiber coming in, you've got a huge a pipe coming in. Just, you know, I would just, you know, most of the time out of the box settings are pretty good. So
Totally.
it just depends if you have special situations.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a lot of IoT devices, then I'd separate out the bands. If you are concerned, you know, setting up with like a VPN, you know, guest networking, you know, if that's an issue, if you have a lot of people coming over, you know, send them to the guest network. So I think that's about it. What do you guys think?
Yep. That pretty much covers it. And a lot of the settings you mentioned are automatically set when you're setting the router up.
Yeah.
like UPnP and the IPv6 should automatically be turned on. But it never hurts to check them. But yeah, those things should be.
I always have to check just to make sure. And you know, it's becoming more prevalent as a protocol, IPv6. So especially on the gaming side.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's something to note. You know, when you're setting up with you know your ISP's hardware, pretty much all fiber connections are going to be running through an ISP modem. It's really hard to find a third-party modem for fiber. I had to really go into the settings and tinker with them to make it work, to make my XR 500 work as a router on that modem, because typically the modems that you get for fiber are gateways, which is both a modem and a router. And if you want to use your own router, you kind of got to deactivate the router on the gateway and activate your router. So there's some tinkering you got to do, but we have a lot of knowledge base articles for a lot of different ISPs on what settings to use to make sure that your router does work. So that's another thing to note is it can be a bit of a headache to set up with the ISP hardware.
Yeah, and just that's the other thing, is just make sure that you shut down the gateways and have it as a pass through.
Yeah, and if you can't actually set it up as a pass through, at least turn the Wi-Fi off on it. So that way there's far less confusion as to which network you're supposed to be connected to. And if one device is connected to the gateway and the other is connected to your router, they're actually on two different networks, and then they'll have problems talking to each other.
Right.
Yep.
Cool. Okay. So we have a question here from Ren asking, if I were to upgrade to the RX 70, are there better options? He says he would have to mount it on a wall so the antennas would be sticking out. Well, this is kind of an interesting question, because really it boils down to budget with this kind of thing. Our RIX series routers do kind of increase pretty linearly in performance with your budget. So whatever you're most comfortable spending, find the right RX router that matches that price, and you're going to be pretty happy with it. We really try to have a big portfolio with various price points to make sure that everybody can find something that they want. So if the RX 70 is what you want to pay, I'd go with that. If you want to stretch the budget and get a 120 maybe, I'd go with that as well. I would definitely suggest staying within the Wi-Fi 6 portfolio, though. We're deep enough into the Wi-Fi 6 era where it's really a bad choice to buy a Wi-Fi 5 router at this point, in my opinion.
Yep. One thing you should check, though, is any one that you're looking at, that it actually is wall mountable, because we have come out with the random model that didn't actually have wall mounts on it. The RAX 70, though, is wall mountable.
Yeah. You can always do you could put a little shelf up maybe if you want to do that as well, but if you want to legit wall mount
I actually did that for one of the routers before I got the next one up and wall mounted it. I put a little shelf there just so it had something to sit on. Now that shelf holds the USB drive that I then have plugged into the wall mounted router.
Oh, nice.
Makes sense. All right, cool. So
coming down to the final minutes, so it's
wow,
speed round time.
Yeah, it looks like we've got a bunch of questions coming in, so we might not be able to reach any new questions. So apologies in advance here. Question here from
you want me to snipe a couple of quick ones real fast?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Armin, that is a great suggestion about having a Nighthawk gaming router on the mesh. Can't tell you that we've had a lot of suggestions on that, but it's something that is very interesting. So just keep your eyes and ears open.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so the next question is from Rabani. I apologize if I mispronounced her name. Basically asking, if I set up a dual band router to an N band router, how much will it affect my performance?
A lot.
If
you're dropping from AC down to N, you're going to see a huge speed decrease on it, because N is very slow compared to AC. And so, you will definitely, basically, you're getting rid of all of the AC functionality. All your 5 gigahertz is gone at that point. And all you're doing is using your 2.4. You'll get the range, but you're definitely going to be stuck in the slow lane on the highway.
Yeah, it would. That's a great way of putting it. yeah, I don't know why you would do that. You know,
Because you own a
quite honest.
VW Bug from the 1960s, and that's only speed it can do.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll keep rapid firing these questions here. Vanessa Kitty asks, "What about the 6 gigahertz band on the X10?"
Yeah. The 60 gigabit, yeah, that was one of the first devices that came out with the 11AD, and it was fun to have there, but you needed client devices that would actually use 11AD, or the 60, and nobody made them, mainly because when you're up at the 60 gigahertz band range, it won't go through walls. So it's basically in the one room where it's at, and that's as much as it's going to do. It will push through a huge amount of data, but because it was limited by hitting any wall and it's not going to make it through, there is a very small market segment for that. There are some companies that are looking at using that for VR helmets, making them wireless. Because you can push a lot of data through, and normally when you have a VR helmet on, you're in the same room as where your gaming computer is and possibly your router. But it's such a limited use, and the limitations on the range are so limited. No one really picked it up, even though we did have it on the X10.
Yeah. All right. This is a quick one. What is the best DNS server? We've had this before. I would suggest just kind of looking up what's best in your area on Google. I mean, there's a lot of different ones to pick from. I personally use, I think it's 1.1.1.1, I think.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, that's kind of, we can't tell you what's going to be best for you. So do a little bit of research on that.
And there is the Google public DNS IPs, which are very good. And if you actually do a Google search on it, you'll find Google DNS servers. You'll find IPv4 is 8888. Or 8844, and then IPv6, they've got some ranges that you can put in there. And I'm going to assume that Google DNS servers are pretty good because they're going to have those mirrored all across the country and across the world.
Yeah. Yeah, so maybe try that. Lots to choose from, though. All right.
Another quick question just that we can answer in the last minute. Tammy asks, can we make a Nighthawk setup and make it like 10 to 30 minutes? Currently, like with the XR 1000, the setup's like 6 minutes tops. So we are trying to get those numbers down.
Yep.
Yeah. All right.
Adrian, we got 28 thumbs up, but thanks for the concern.
All right, cool. So we're going to answer a couple more questions here, and then we're going to have to call it. So apologies if we missed your question. With virtually everything going wireless, is there any talk of increasing signal strength to get better wireless coverage on the high gigahertz? Faster speeds and less coverage is a big downer. It really comes down to physics.
Well, actually, it's not just physics if you're talking about the signal strength. It comes down to licensing by the FCC and what they'll allow. They actually have max power strength that you can have on the signals. You could get a 6 gigahertz signal that would travel twice as far as a 5. If they allowed you to pump so much power into it, you could just blast it that far. But the FCC keeps tight control on the maximum power strength of all the signals so that they don't interfere with other signals and other things that are happening.
Definitely. Yeah, I forgot about that part. That's you could always throw more power at it and fix the problem, but that's illegal. So
yes.
Yeah.
All right, we're gonna
until
do this.
They change
the
those
last one
recommendations.
Here. Last one here. Okay, 2 more. Given the limits of Wi-Fi distance and throughput, the higher bandwidth throughput.
Yep. The higher the bandwidth goes, why would there ever be a Wi-Fi 7, 8, or 9?
Thank you.
Because the Wi-Fi 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and so on doesn't actually have to do with the frequency that you're going at. It just has to do with the standard. So for instance, with Wi-Fi 5 and Wi-Fi 6, they both use 2.4 and 5 gigahertz bands, but Wi-Fi 6 uses them better than Wi-Fi 5 does through a lot of tricks and a lot of ways that they've changed data packets going back and forth. So with Wi-Fi 7, most likely, it's not going to be a higher frequency. It'll probably be more optimization and a better way of actually pushing data around and handling more clients. That was what Wi-Fi 6 was designed for, is because we were getting so many devices in our home, we were kind of saturating the abilities of Wi-Fi 5 because we had so many clients. So Wi-Fi 6 was designed to handle a lot more clients. So it wasn't going to increase the speed, but it would feel like it was being increased because you didn't have as much congestion because there were more lanes of traffic that the cars could be on, even if all the cars could still only go 50 miles an hour.
Yeah, it's more about, so when you hear Wi-Fi 5 or Wi-Fi 6, that is talking about the protocol and the optimization of protocol. That's why you're going to see a 7 or an 8 or a 9. When you're seeing, 5 gigahertz or 6 gigahertz, you're talking about the frequency, which does have the limit. But what you're going to find is, just like the jump between 5 and 6, there is going to be optimizations and improvements as it goes on, and you're going to see probably better connection and less congestion, but you're probably going to see about the same speeds.
Right. All right, last one. We'll try to keep this one short. We do have to log off here. Vanessa asks, if I buy 2 RX E500s and have 2 incoming internet cable connections, will the 2 routers work successfully as 2 separate networks?
Yes.
Theoretically, you could set it up like that. Not necessarily advisable though, because you kind of want to have it be under one network. If you're going to have 2 access points, you're probably going to want it under one network so you can have that kind of nice handoff between your router and satellite, versus in this setup, you'd have 2 separate networks. You'd have to manually switch every time. So
yeah,
kind
you
of that
definitely
quality of life sacrifice.
You would end up with 2 separate networks if that's what you wanted.
Which
some
would
people
be
want 2 different ones.
Right, which would throw you back to that same feeling 4 or 5 years ago, where your range extender, you'd have to log into the different range extender, which was a huge bummer.
You could do it,
but it is theoretically possible to put both of them on the same network by certain configurations, certain wiring that you have and stuff, but it's very technical to be able to do it. But technically, you could actually have 2 of them connected into the same network. Not something I would suggest to do at home, but it can be done.
Okay.
All right, well, we're going to end the show there. Thank you all for joining us. We had a great nonstop stream of questions. We really appreciate that. We're 1 like away from 30, so if somebody's watching and they haven't liked the show, definitely hit that button. It really helps us out and keeps us on the air. Aside from that, everybody have a nice, safe weekend. We'll be back next week with Angelo. And thanks again for tuning in. Anything else you guys want to shout out?
Nope. I will be out next week because I will be getting my 2nd vaccination. But I'll be back the week after that. So we'll see you. I'll see you guys in 2 weeks. But thanks a lot, and we'll everybody have a great weekend. Stay safe.
Yep. See everyone next week.
All right. Take care, everybody.